First movement. Spoiler warning, sonata.
It's Tuesday morning, and I'm preparing to listen to a podcast about the Black Heart Boys Choir book and audiobook. It takes me several minutes to find the episode, because these amateurs don't even have a proper website. It's just a Facebook and an iTunes. Before I'm able to get past all the preening pop stars and their vain attempts to seduce me into clicking on their garbage, the keys of my keyboard dissolve and swirl into black smoke. A cloud forms into the equine features of a unicorn's face.
Young Master Beaumont, you've neither read nor listened to the book they will review, and Marianne unravels major plot twists for you. If you insist on getting spoiled in spite of my advice, just remember you were warned about your sacrifice. So, I have a question for you.
Yes?
What are you doing this weekend?
Why?
Because this Saturday at Mad Lab, It's All Been Done Radio Hour's annual holiday show starts at 5 p.m.
What?
That's right. Featuring the return of Jake Cotton in an all-new Privates and an all-new song in Universe Journey, performed by Nathan Haley. You like music, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Of course you do. Then, at 8 p.m., Mad Lab is showing an original play by Lane Stanley, Lipstick, a sweet, silly farce with a heart of gold and a drawer full of sex toys.
Okay, I'm out. Hitting reverse. I am done. Fuck. Okay. Signing up for all of the therapy. Welcome to Marianne's Macabre Review.
Second movement. Madrigal of the Macabre Review.
Hello and welcome out to Marianne's Macabre Review. Today we have with us Jessica.
Hi.
Jimmy.
Hello.
A new guest.
This is my debut on Marianne's Macabre
Yes.
Review.
He was originally the owner of It's All Been Done Presents. And it took us getting off the network to get him on the network.
Well, no, a couple times you would mention something. I'm like, oh, and then we never yeah. But I don't watch much horror. So I listen to the intros and outros every week to your show. And I'll skim the episodes. And if I did keep one of your episodes that I know I'm going to see the movie. And it's like sitting in my podcast feed reminding me that as soon as I see the movie, I need to listen.
Which one is it?
Was the one where everybody was quiet. John Krasinski.
Yes, Quiet Place.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, that's a funny one.
And as you can already hear, Keith is here also.
Yes, I am.
It's very nice to meet you, Keith.
Hi.
So, J. Keith Jackson, do you want to tell us what we are covering today?
Well, today we're talking about Black Heart Boys Choir. Primarily the audiobook, which is essentially the same as the written work of it. But yeah, it's a book by Curtis M. Lawson. And these people here have actually listened to it.
We have.
And have some strong opinions, I think.
Oh, yes, we do.
And, before we get started, I'm going to say, of course, I'm a little biased because of the way because I'm the one who recorded it.
What?
Yeah, I was narrating and doing all the voices.
It did sound like you.
And I will say that I was certainly disappointed with the way certain things went, or in the sense that it wasn't doing the things that I expected. There were several points. Even I just started re-listening to it yesterday, and today I got to about maybe the first half of it, and it's enough to sort of refresh my memory. I could see several places where it seemed like we were going to have a completely different kind of story. And it hits you in a strange way when it doesn't do the thing you want it to do, or you think that you want it to do, because it's you want a happier ending, you want like a Glee Club standoff, or you want to they even tease like this could have been a love story at some point, and then no, it really wasn't. So,
I mean, personally, I like when I don't know what's coming and they do the unexpected.
And some of the things I can tell, well, we'll get into that in a bit. Just Marianne can.
Are we doing our general thoughts?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I started out really liking the book, and then it hit one point where I was like, well, fuck this. and I was like, no, well, maybe he'll get help. Maybe this is something supernatural. Maybe he's not just a guy going insane. A kid going insane. And I don't know. I really wanted to like this book. And I do to a point. However, the characters are deplorable and I don't like them. I started out I really wanted to like Lucian because of things Keith had said. And I was like, I really gotta like this guy. And then I was like, I fucking hate this guy. He's not a great guy. So the only one that I liked was Maxwell. And we're going to cover spoilers here, folks.
Yeah.
So
this is your last chance.
Yeah. Turn back now if you don't want to hear spoilers. And Maxwell dies. And I was like, and at one point in time, I stormed into the room where Keith was at, and I said, if Maxwell dies, I'm not fucking listening to any more of this. And it was like 20 minutes later, he's offed. And I came in and I was like, I'm going to continue listening, but goddamn it, I'm mad. So, yeah, not my favorite book. It's up there because, of course, Keith read it, and I like when Keith reads stuff. But content-wise, this is not my jam. If it leaned a little bit more supernatural and not an unreliable narrator being like, I'm going crazy, but I don't know it, then I maybe would have had a little bit more to it. Keith, I keep seeing you gesturing. I know you want to interrupt me.
I know. Just re-listening to it, I think that there is a combination of both things happening. Because, there are certain things that were happening with Gravetree that wouldn't have made sense if it were completely in his head.
Okay.
But other than that, I'll go into more detail later.
Okay. Jessica?
So, I need to preface my opinion with like two other statements.
Of course.
So, my opinion of the contents of the book versus my feelings on audiobooks versus my feelings on Keith's performance are all different things. So, Keith, if I criticize the book or audiobooks in general, because I don't really care to listen to audiobooks, I don't want you to think it's a critique of your performance.
Well,
Keith, you did a very good performance.
Thank you.
But voice actors suck, and we just can't help that.
Yeah.
But it's like, we'll get to like my opinions about all these things. But also, I don't like what I call white boy bullshit stories, which are The Catcher in the Rye, Fight Club, Joker. Like, you'll notice a pattern with the kinds of things I don't like, and this fits in with that. Mm-hmm. And so, like...
That is very fair.
2 chapters in, I was like, fuck this guy. Can we go back to the prologue where everyone was dead? God.
And another spoiler, we really do go back to that eventually.
Yeah, so it was just like, it's not my kind of story, which we'll get in more detail.
Yeah.
Like, I know other people enjoy those other titles that I mentioned. They're just not my kind.
Yeah.
So it's like, it fits in with that category of things that I just don't like. So, I wasn't a huge fan of the story. Jimmy, what about you?
Well, in terms of audiobooks, I enjoy listening to audio dramatizations and things, but audiobooks for some reason...
I hope so.
It's on radio. For some reason, I have trouble retaining as much when I'm listening to an audiobook. I'll retain the story much better if I see it on the page. I think it's just the way my memory works. I can visualize the words. I can't remember as well. So I've been like scrolling and refreshing my memory of what even happened 2 months ago when I listened to it now.
I've got some funny comments about that too, for myself anyway.
But I did, obviously I'm a fan of J. Keith Jackson's work, and I was excited to listen to an audiobook by him and greatly enjoyed your performance. There was only one line I told you, and I can't remember what the line was, late in the audiobook where I'm like, oh, that's Keith. Because, you get caught up and it's a performance, but there was one line where I felt like he slipped back into normal Keith Jackson.
Yeah, it was a voice. It was one of the teachers, I think, had your voice.
Was it Mr. Jackson? No.
No, was it the English teacher?
It could have been.
Yeah, I think he had your voice. So...
Well, some of the things were... Some of it's a little intentional, some of it is. I mean, it wasn't like I want to sound like myself, but otherwise...
Sure.
The voice didn't really need me to go in this completely other direction away from my natural voice in that case. So.
See, here, with me, I know the Keith voice versus the regular voice versus Keith audiobook voice. And so the difference I had the one book I had a problem with was his original ones that were nonfiction. They were, and that was, I'd turn them on and it's Keith talking to me.
And she hates that.
And
really?
Boring. and not, I love Keith's voice. He reads to me in the car and all this stuff. I mean, like, when we first started out, when we were first dating, he would read Sherlock Holmes to me in the car when we were going on road trips and stuff. So it was really good. It was a fun, obviously I enjoyed Keith's voice. It's just, if you're talking to me about philosophy for 3 hours in Keith voice, I'm going to check out. And when it's a story like Black Heart Boys Choir, then maybe I'm going to, well, not maybe, obviously I'm going to be more entertained because there are voices that of course they all kind of sound like Keith, but they're not Keith. That's the one where I really got sucked into it was the Kishi, where it was just like, wait a minute, this is Keith. I'd have to remind myself that this was Keith. And with this, it was mainly men. There was 2 girls in it, I think, and a teacher, a woman.
Yeah.
And maybe his mom.
The counselor.
The counselor. Yeah.
I don't think his mother ever spoke in it.
So yeah. It was all Keith's voice, but it didn't ring true like, this is Keith. And I never had a moment where I was like, that's Keith. Because sometimes I do, and you're like, that's my husband, yay. But
I was feeling pretty critical about it as I was re-listening to it. I listened to it with a goal in mind, or remembering what I wanted to sound like at the time, or thought that I was going to sound like, and comparing the sound quality or the way the recording was. And I wasn't really happy until probably chapter 7 or so, really. And then, especially once the second movement kicked in, I felt a lot more comfortable. But otherwise, I was really nitpicking and going, not far enough away from that or whatever. Wanted my voice to sound higher there, and it wasn't. But, I was sick through a lot of it. I forgot about that.
Forgive yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, Keith, it's fine. It's fine. It sounded really good. I did not notice any inconsistencies in the voices at all.
No, me neither.
So,
Well, I mean,
take the compliment.
Thank you. All right. Yes, but
I really enjoyed your German singing.
Oh God,
that was great.
Yeah, that was.
Thank you. I know.
Surprised me.
Not sure how Karen would feel about it, but
We are not talking about the fictional Karen that is in many of the memes these days, but Karen, who also works with me in It's All Been Done Radio Hour, and who was a guest star on the Death Note episode we did a year or two ago, which was quite entertaining, largely because of her. She happens to have a lot of voice training and also does training herself, so hearing me try to sing an opera would probably be of interest to her and amuse her. So, back to it.
Yeah, it was okay. It was okay. I will say. I'm not going to go like, yes, that was awesome. But I mean, for what I had to do, yeah.
You're fine.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, I guess I would like to get a synopsis from two people.
Well, all right.
I want an actual synopsis from you. And then I want a synopsis from Jessica and I afterwards. Okay. Give us like a I was about to say 5 minute, like a minute long synopsis of the book. And then Jessica and I will do our synopsis of the book.
It's hard there's a couple things I wanted to say, but to put it like in the proper framework before I even did that is one of the things the author, I think, mentioned in his own synopsis, or even in maybe the foreword. It was, I think, heavily influenced by, like, say, The Clockwork Orange, or A Clockwork Orange. I don't know if you've ever read that, but some of the things he was doing with the way the chapters would start was very much in a similar voice to Alex, the narrator from Clockwork Orange. Mm-hmm. And I'll come back to that later about some of my more conflicted feelings about how I felt, especially by the end of this story, because it was very similar, and I realized that my tastes have aged more than I realized as far as how much I can put up with from certain characters. And anyway, it starts off with the prologue, and Lucian is sort of poetically talking about the end of the world, describing in very symbolic terms what is going on. He's talking about his choir essentially fighting off demons and other things that have happened, being betrayed by another demon. And you're like, that's interesting. This is about a song, too, apparently. So as we go on, he talks about moving to this new school because his father killed himself and his family has run out of money. And he has to talk to a counselor about his problems. And he's certainly not fitting in very well with the students there. This is sort of like a public school in, not quite Boston, but somewhere in Massachusetts. Some place that was sort of blue-collar-ish, perhaps. And his counselor wants him to try out for the Glee Club, so does this new friend that he met at the record store while he was working there. He thinks it's beneath him, ostracized further, meets some bad kids, quote-unquote, who feel the same way about the Glee Club and are actually musicians in their own right and want to start a new choir with him and his friend Maxwell. He's with Maxwell, he uncovered a madrigal, a choral piece that seems very fascinating but has been scratched out. He wants to find out more about it. And as he goes along, he finds out that, well, he doesn't know that it's cursed, but people keep hinting at it very strongly. And eventually he meets, or thinks that he meets, a demon who wants to help him unlock the rest of the song. And to do that, he has to commit acts of violence. And things go worse from there.
Okay, Jessica, give us our...
Okay, so picture this. A hipster incel named Lucian, main character. He's inherited a superiority complex from his dad and probably some sort of mental illness. He may have been a crack baby. I don't know how long his mom's been doing drugs, but at least since he was real young. Not that crack babies are
crazy.
Gonna have mental illness. I'm just saying, he's got problems. His dad killed himself at some unspecified amount of time previously, so that just adds to his problems. Mom's away drinking, doing drugs, not engaging, more problems. Goes to a new school, thinks everyone's beneath him, superiority complex. So no one likes him because he's a dickhead. And he's like, all these people are just dumb plebs who don't understand my greatness. Blah. Anyway, yeah, discovers his father's work all scratched out. It's going to be his masterpiece. Mm-hmm. So he's on a mission to find the madrigal notes. Collects a band of terrible people and the local misfit who's like, wow, I made a friend. You didn't make a friend.
The precious, precious cinnamon roll.
You did not make a friend.
You did not make a friend.
Yeah, he's just...
Yeah, so then he...
Can I qualify a couple things first? First of all, I think that incels are generally worse.
Oh, he's pretty bad.
Yeah, Lucian is bad, but I think he's more like a sociopath. He doesn't really... I don't think he has a mission for women in general.
Charming.
But, yeah.
Sociopaths are charming.
Yeah.
They're good at blending in. He's shit at it.
Yeah. Go ahead. Please continue.
I was referring more to the emotional problems that he has than any sort of outward appearance. I think that he would be charming in the right circles. It's just not in this place. And the bullies were certainly not blameless in here. I mean, the kids there were pretty goddamn awful themselves. I don't think they would have given him a chance to fit in because he was already different. And I think that probably one of the more important things that he said toward the end of the book was, this book has no heroes. Like really everybody was bad in some way.
The teachers, even.
But,
which doesn't mean they deserve to be slaughtered.
Certainly.
But
yes,
they weren't good people.
But can we trust that they really weren't good? Or is it just him?
That could... that's a good point.
Yeah.
His whole thing, it bothered me so much. His whole thing with the guidance counselor, where he's like, her fake smile, blah, blah, blah. She's paid to be here. Yes, she is. Get over it.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean she doesn't care about you.
Right.
Doesn't mean she's not putting on a nice smile to, like, make you comfortable.
Yeah.
Doesn't actually mean it's a fake smile. I don't know if he really knows what real smiles look like.
Yeah.
He's not had a lot of love, this child.
Yeah, no. So...
Yeah, I would think most guidance counselors go into it because they actually want to help students, not to make their lives miserable.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would assume.
You don't become a guidance counselor because you're like in it for the money.
No.
You do it because it's a labor of love.
Right.
And those are the reasons. So Lucian, the moment Asher is like, hey, check out these guns. Mm-hmm. I was just like, oh man, I was just like, please. I just it started all lining up with like the Columbine kids, the two that were, because they were the outcasts. So now these two outcasts have Lucian with them, and they've drug in poor Maxwell, and then the woman, also the girl. What was her name?
Violet.
They brought in Violet.
Last name?
Sarkissian.
Because I kept calling her Lando Calrissian
The
whole time.
So, yeah.
That part made me very uncomfortable once we got there. Ties in a couple things I was hinting at before, alluding to. One, it's weird how little I retained sometimes, even though I was the one saying it. When I go back and edit it, I'd start to hear things and go, wow, I don't remember doing that. And then there's like, there were a couple things I said. Well, the scene with him and Asher, where he was showing him the gun, for example, there was a lot of internal monologuing and thoughts from within thoughts from Lucian as he was going. I tried to differentiate that. In the book, it's in italics, so anytime there's italics, I would use
the reverb.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was, what's the other thing?
The echoey.
The effect.
The
yes.
effect.
No, it was reverb. Sorry. Anyway. Yes, Marianne, I'm sorry. Anyway, there were a couple of words within the sentence as he was talking to him that were kind of censored by his thought. Like he even mentioned to himself that he wasn't sure what he actually said just then. And they were getting to percussion, as it turned out later, would also be a reference, yes, a reference to the bullets flying.
Yeah.
And like A Clockwork Orange, somehow, I mean, God, need to organize my thoughts here for a second. I was trying to examine why the idea of them using guns to kill all these people was so much more uncomfortable to me than if he'd used magic. If he'd been shooting fireballs or, Carrie, even though she burned that entire room full of people, some of whom might have been innocent, might not have been, because it was supernatural, and it was purely supernatural. In this, they were, we know that they were probably using assault rifles and guns to shoot people up, and it's just too much like real life, and it just...
I think you just hit on it. It's too much like real life. This happens way too often, and we hear about it in the news, and we have to watch the grieving parents and classmates, and to be asked to picture it in a story is rough.
Yep.
I agree.
I think my problem with the gun, finding out it was not supernatural, I was just like, oh, people who were bullied are going to shoot up the school. People who have mental illness are going to shoot up the school.
Yeah.
Okay. I got real annoyed. Like, I was just like, that's not true, first of all.
It's people who are bullied and have access to gun and have mental illness and don't get any help. They don't have loving. It's like, there's it's layers. And you can't just set it down to like,
they were bullied.
They were bullied, or they were this, or they were that.
And the bullying in this book bothered me so much. I was like, it's been a decade since I was in high school, but the bullies would have been laughed out of the school if this is what they did. They'd have been like, you pissed on his suit? What kind of dog are you? Get out. We would have been like, no, that's not funny.
I can tell you, I was in middle school, like a bazillion years ago, but I was picked on in middle school, and one day in gym class, somebody did piss on my gym clothes.
What the fuck?
Okay.
I think it's A, different for girls, B, different for different areas of the country,
I was just
cities.
like, this is the dumbest bullying I've ever heard of.
It's not...
I was in a shitty little town, too, so...
Yeah. Well, there you are. I think one other part of the thing that he says at the beginning, this is one of my notes. The thing he says at the beginning about the end of the world being a microcosmic event, and that ties in later, eventually, to the counselor trying to warn him, don't make this your entire world. The world is bigger than this.
That teenager syndrome.
Yeah. Even when he tried in his mind, he tried to leave and couldn't because they wouldn't let him. Yeah. It all came down again to that this being his entire universe, that the end of the world was the end of that world that he made.
See, I didn't give my opinion on the story itself earlier. I was just talking about Keith and whatever, but I don't think this was poorly written. I don't think the characters are poorly formed. It's not a type of story I would generally get into, and it's probably not something I would seek out. And I think a lot of it was very disturbing, but I don't think it's a bad book. I don't know. There's something, the material just, to me, is disturbing and rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's almost like The Butterfly Garden, except that was a really good book. Mm-hmm. Even though I hated the material.
Right.
So I don't exactly know what the difference is here.
I think it's a subject matter.
Yeah, maybe. They were both super disturbing and violent subject matter, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's too close to you personally, you were saying, for some of it. And then also in the back half of that, you tie into things that could be happening in real life.
Yeah.
That's
true. The Butterfly Garden doesn't happen in real life.
Garden.
There is actually a lot of human trafficking and stuff going on. We just don't hear about it nearly as much as the school shooting.
Especially in Ohio.
Yeah.
We're number one in the U.S.
So maybe if that was in the headlines every day instead of the school shootings, the Butterfly Garden would be the one that we're all like skizzed out about. Yeah. Although I was anxious and eager to read the sequels to the Butterfly Garden because I thought it was written so well. This one, if there's a sequel, I don't think I need to read it.
Yeah.
So
I don't think there will be.
No, clearly. Well, you never know. Maybe somebody else finds the curse, and I don't know.
Someone could get obsessed.
If there is a curse, like you said, it could just be a mental illness of this one guy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It seemed like there were too many other indicators that there was at least some. Well, I'm already rethinking that myself. So you remember Philip Gravetree?
Yes.
His father's partner. He was afraid of the music himself, and also flipped out when he saw it, said it was a curse, and tried to undo first of all, he was alarmed that when he learned that Lucian had even been trying to play the song at all, and once Lucian was outside of his house, he started trying to play it backwards to sort of banish it. which meant that at least he also believed that something...
But if we have an unreliable narrator, do we know that's what he was actually doing?
Or is it, what did his dad do to Gravetree?
Right.
With that thing that fucked him up so bad.
I mean, we've seen that his dad had tortured and killed people before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So could he possibly have done the same thing to Gravetree and it caused a mental snap with his partner? Like, you saw that when they did it, when Lucien attacked other people, it worked. And even with Maxwell, when they were a partner of his, it was even more powerful because it was a partner.
No, he didn't get any with Maxwell.
No, he didn't get anything?
Yeah, that
it was...
that in itself is evidence that maybe it was in his head, at least for that part. Mm-hmm. But that, I don't know. I mean, I've had a lot of strange dreams in which I was able to create things or have people say a lot of things that I don't think I would have been able to imagine if I were awake, but that doesn't necessarily mean it was from a demon. It's just some other unaccessed part of my mind that needs to... Anyway.
I was real disappointed there wasn't actually a magical demon unicorn.
Yeah.
Real disappointed.
Do we know that there wasn't, though? That's the thing.
I believe there was not. And I am sad.
Okay, now, all right. Having
Amducius to be real.
Reading the text, it was... this is where some of that would have been an advantage. Because you can see what is italicized, what isn't. And I had to interpret things in a certain way. And I had to go with the assumption that the things that weren't in italics were at least things that he was observing in real life. Whether or not you agree with some of his conclusions, those things were actually happening. As opposed to him filtering it through some other voice. Or something that he was potentially imagining in visions. Like all of his encounters with Amducius, or when Amducius was speaking, those were italicized. There was never any definite proof that he was there, but it's not out of the question. Other things, though, when he was, when he saw that he was going places or talking to people, or, they were reacting to things he was doing, those were really happening. So, I don't know.
I paid real close attention, which I appreciate the audio that you did.
Yeah.
Because I could see the italics in my head.
I hoped.
I paid real close attention at the end because, to be honest, I put this on 2x speed once I figured out I could do it. I did not like the story. I was like, I got halfway through it and I was like, oh my god, I can speed this up. Sped it up and then listened to the last chapter at normal speed because I was like, I should probably listen to the end like a normal human being and hear what Keith is saying to me. And so I paid real close attention at the end to when you did the echoey stuff for the italics. To just see, I was like, is any of this demon stuff in his normal voice? No.
Yeah.
I loved that he called the cops demons, though. That cracked me up.
Yeah.
The demons are coming in. I was like, the police. Mm-hmm. They've arrived.
The reason they were blank spots is because it wasn't for them to sing. I was like,
My favorite was, she has to begin our song anyway. She's screaming. Like she's running into the gym screaming. And it's like, oh, now's where we come in. I was like, whoa. What?
I mean, there were things like that I really enjoyed. It's just, I don't know. These are the sorts of things I probably want to ask the author about tomorrow because we're going to be talking to him. I had some of these things written in. I don't know.
I was real happy that we were not Skyping the author into this because I was like, I don't want to be a total asshole to this person. But that could be what they were going for. My opinions could be what they were going for.
That is exactly... That's another thing that I
really want to ask him.
I'm assuming, or I'm hoping that he wasn't intending for this to come off as a likable character. I mean, he even said in the final chapter that...
There are no heroes.
Yeah, the character didn't even think of himself as being a good person necessarily. That was one of my favorite lines to say, actually, too, is, that if there were any heroes in this story, it wouldn't be Ari fucking Cole, the bully who's trying to rush him down and tackle him and save the day. But, yeah. All right, so he's going through the internet and finding things about Amducius. One of the things they mention is that he usually has one or two familiars. And I wonder if that was meant to suggest that Lucian became the familiar later, or if that were Asher and JC, as they became indoctrinated. They seemed to, these were real, actual people. They seemed to be sort of taken over by the same obsession, kind of eagerly pushing him along to do things in certain places as well.
I thought theirs was because he let them do violent stuff.
Yeah.
And like he supported, and they were like, "Oh, you see a unicorn? Fuck, sure. Let's do it."
Could be that too.
Violence unicorn. Great.
Mm-hmm. I think it's joint psychosis. I mean, they all. It's like when a riot happens. It's like no one knows why it started, but they all do it. Well, someone knows why it started, but how do you spell amducious?
AMDU SCIAS. And he also mentioned, I'm remembering this only because I listened to it very recently when he was talking about the other possible spellings of it, like
AMDUSCIAS.
Yes.
It's a name from Castlevania.
There's also one with just DUSIAS and one with a K instead.
Just needs a yellow unicorn on it. Oh, there he is with his unicorn. Anywho, please continue, Keith.
I noticed a couple of places, and I wish back when I was writing these notes, I certainly thought I was going to remember more carefully what I meant at the time than I did. But there were certain places where Lucian seemed to be rhyming accidentally or without meaning to.
Oh, and fucking A, and Dusha speaks in verse.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so I wondered if that was some part of the influence or,
I was like, guy, he'd understand you a lot better if you just spoke in plain English.
Demons don't speak in plain English.
Freaking demons. God.
Demons, am I right?
But, yeah. So the things I liked were, as Jimmy said, I thought the characters were actually better portrayed than you might imagine if you've met people like that. I
think we've all met people like this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yes.
Some of my best friends. No.
I thought there was some...
Just kidding, I'm kidding.
I mean, we've all been bullied or, just by the group of people that we have. We are the people that get bullied, not
Speak
the bullies.
for yourself. I was super popular.
Okay, yeah.
Which goes totally against what I already admitted in the same podcast.
Say what you... I didn't speak in school, so I was creepy. I was actually just super shy when I was younger.
Yeah. I was super shy. Everyone thought I was nerdy, and I wasn't. I was just like, I'm just getting by, and I hung out with a bunch of other outcast friends, and that's it. Even if I had outcast friends to hang out with at the time. They were older or younger or whatever.
My background was complicated because of the size of the school, I think. But, yeah, I've certainly been bullied, though.
Yep.
People tried, and I creeped them out.
People tried, and Jessica summoned her demon unicorn.
Well, it's like when you don't talk because you're shy, and then someone tries to bully you, and you just say some weird violent sentence to them. They're like, "Whoa, that's fucking weird. I'm out." And I'm like, it worked. They left me alone.
The thing, like Ari Cole says something about, is that the same piss stain, or is that the same? He's wearing the same. He thinks he's wearing the same suit.
Well,
and
he's making a joke in a lunchroom about it.
Yeah, and so I immediately put myself into that situation because I'm sure I was in some situation like that. Is that the same outfit you wore yesterday, or is that whatever? And I think I would have been like, "Come on, guys, no," because as a normal person, not psychotic, I would have still tried to be their friend and been like, haha, jokes, yeah, hilarious. And because that's how I was in high school. And I think that's what bothered me about this book was there were so many times when Lucian could have taken a different route where he would have been like, when they were like, you can't be in here without a teacher. Hey, why don't you go ask a teacher?
Yeah.
Can you support me? I'm doing a choir.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fine? Same with, like, the guidance counselor. It's like, guidance counselor could have written a note and been like, this is fine. He can use the auditorium to sing in. It's just, why do the rules matter that much?
Well, that I think that's also part of it. As I was going through today, I noticed that there were instances where the adults could have been helpful and weren't as well.
Right.
Well, all of, the principal, the teacher, the counselor.
It was because the way Lucian came across, if he had asked instead of just
stuck his nose up.
But would that have been keeping with the character that was built?
I know.
Fatal flaws, and yes.
Have you seen Fighting with My Family?
Not yet. That's the one about Paige.
Oh, yeah, Paige, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I've seen parts of it, but not all of it.
So, like when she goes to the camp and she makes a comment about one of the people, and so they're all like, oh, wow, she's a bitch. Mm-hmm. And then when that's brought to her attention that she said something that actually hurt somebody's feelings, she's like, oh, this makes sense now why no one likes me. And she apologizes. Yeah. And, like, things get, like, so it's like, there were so many points where I was like, Lucian, you could just be like, whoops, realize you're part of the problem by not wanting to associate with anyone else and thinking you're better than everybody else. But he wouldn't. So, bye. Yeah. And then the first time he saw the girl, he was like, I want to murder her. I was like, whoa, you need to tone it down. Like, that's a step above.
That's like, not romantic?
Everything he said was like, I want to kiss her and I want to bite her lips off. I was like, what?
Yeah, when...
Incels are known for their sensitivity to
that was there were two parts that I brought up to Keith about incel. It's like, I want to have sex with her, but I also want to kill her because she won't give me the time of day. And then the part with Maxwell at the end where he's like, instead of saying,
you want to preface it with the boxcar scene?
Okay, so Asher and the other guy kidnapped
JC Chavez.
Chase McCants would murder you. He loves JC Chavez.
They
actually think that's what his name is. Sorry.
Is it important?
No, I guess it
isn't. I don't even know who JC Chavez is.
He's an NSYNC.
Oh.
He's not an incel, he's an NSYNC.
Okay.
Yeah.
Funny, I didn't.
Okay.
Continue, I'm sorry.
So he kidnaps Maxwell and I'm just read the back of your shirt for the other guy's name. JC Asher, yes. They kidnap Maxwell and his girlfriend April?
Ashley.
And they torture Ashley to death. And then they have Maxwell tied up. And they're about to kill him also. And Lucian thinks... Are you going to pull it up? Is that what...
I'm just looking for the name. Go ahead. Just keep going.
Okay. Lucian thinks, I'm glad Maxwell won't have to see his girlfriend raped. Didn't get to see his girlfriend raped or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, no. Instead of like, I hope they don't rape her. I hope I'm glad Maxwell didn't get to see his girlfriend raped.
All right. So I remember the context from the end of that. He was examining the body, or kind of looking it over. Didn't see any evidence of intercourse. So yes, or rape. And so his reaction was, I'm thankful. I'm thankful that she wasn't raped. It was, I'm thankful that Maxwell didn't have to see it.
Yeah.
So he's not totally irredeemable. He has a soft spot.
For Maxwell, not the woman that is now dead.
Well, yeah.
And also not raped.
It's like, the whole time he's like, Maxwell, what a fatty. God, he listens to this shitty music. And then it's like, oh no, Maxwell, my one true love. I was like, no, you don't get to suddenly give a shit. No.
I mean, I don't know if Haley's ever said one nice word to me, but he's still my friend, so...
I'm pretty sure he likes you, though.
Yeah, he does.
So the name is J.C. Ramirez in the book. That's why I was confused for a second. I was like, wait, wasn't it Chavez? No, it was not.
Well, I'm glad we cleared that up.
So I think this is actually the first audiobook I've ever listened to. Mm-hmm. I've listened to like a BBC radio drama type thing before of books, like where it's not narrated, it's just them talking to each other. And it kind of just reinforced the fact that I would rather read something because I can read it faster than I can listen to it.
So I will tell you my exception for audiobooks. If you get an autobiography read by the person that wrote it, you get like a Tina Fey or an Amy Poehler reading their own book about their own life, those for me are superior to reading the page. But that's like the one exception of audiobook.
Yeah, and it's like, again, nothing to do, that had nothing to do with the story. And again, nothing to do with Keith's performance. It's just a personal preference where it's like, I can read it faster, so I prefer to read. Mm-hmm.
My thing is, I didn't ever listen to audiobooks until my mom passed away. And I found what I would do was on the way home from work, I would always call Mom. And after Mom died, that was a long ass ride home where my mind would slip into thoughts of Mom and I would cry and be upset. And so I was like, I need to find other things. So I found podcasts and audiobooks, and I find I read just fine, and I have some friends that are dyslexic, and so that's how they consume books, because they cannot read a page without getting confused or getting something messed up. So it's the preferred way to read that way. And so I find that during that drive home, and usually now drive into work and drive home and throughout the day, I can listen to an audiobook, and when I normally can't read, I'm doing mindless activity, might as well be doing something for my brain at the same time. So that's why I like and enjoy audiobooks, and I have a ton of them on my phone because I have an Audible subscription, and I even got to the point where I've gone to the gold or platinum membership, so I get instead of 2 credits a month, I get 4 credits a month, so I can burn through the books.
Damn girl, you go.
But it's good, and I enjoy playing excerpts with Keith, being like, what do you think of this?
It has been helpful at times for me to hear the way that other people are doing things so I can compare. And yeah, I mean, sometimes it does sound fine. Other times I'm like, okay, I wouldn't do it that way. And it's taken actually a long time to adjust to the idea or how to actually pace it. Even listening to myself today, I realized that there are certain things that don't come across as well as I would have liked simply because of how carefully I have to speak to make sure that every syllable is understandable when someone's listening to it, or so that I don't have to re-record things too many more times, because it's the most time-consuming process. That I'm just out there in the room and I have to say things like 2 or 3 times a piece as I'm hearing myself say it to make sure it was done the right way.
What I should have noted here is that editing is really the part that takes the most amount of time, as I just relearned today.
So what I liked was Keith's performance, and that's not just me saying it. I actually really did. I liked how all the characters had like distinct voices. I really liked how you, like I said, I could see the italics. I was like, oh, great.
Yes.
I know what's happening. Excellent. So, and like I said, I think it was just the teacher's voice where I was like, oh, that's Keith. That's Keith. But it was funny to listen. I can't think of an example, but while you were reading, there were certain words that I pronounced differently. So I was like, weird.
There's some of the things I had to look up to just to make sure, because anytime I'm even a little bit like, maybe, I have to go to the dictionary and make sure that it doesn't matter one way or the other, or that this is not the,
Yeah, and it made me think So, like, since it's you, I was like, okay, Keith's the performer. Because I never really thought about, like, oh, audiobooks are a performance. But they are. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, oh, how do you say this line? Here's how I'd say it. Like, it just made me like, oh, not that it's like, not that I didn't like how you said lines or anything like that. It's just like, oh, I would say differently as a different actor.
Okay, so I got to this chapter earlier today, and it's the one where he goes back to his old house.
Oh, okay.
And it starts off with, regular text, and then it's just italics for several pages. Just that entire thing of him going
to the final letter or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He killed the whole family there, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so he doesn't bring that up like it's anything later on. And
she waved goodbye to me. Or no, she looked real sad.
Yeah, the front door opens and the father walks out, leaving my home. Then the mother. Finally, the daughter approaches the doorway.
That poor family.
Looks up at him, essentially, like... And he during the dream sequence, he's interpreting that as her wanting to be released.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Like, pleadingly, help me get away. It's like, okay, bye. She leaves.
Please kill me.
Yeah.
Yep.
This life is so boring. I'm 10.
That's another thing that I find hard to get behind is my life is so bad. My life sucks so bad. Oh, by the way, I'm 15, 16, 17. It's like...
that Romeo and Juliet bullshit.
Yeah. It's like, okay, my life in the teenage years versus now is light years different, and I wasn't the person I am now back in high school, and so it's like I would like to have seen, or I would wish, obviously we won't get this, but like have that moment where it's like, hey, this isn't the end of the world.
Well, and do they make it clear? Because it sounded like it had been years since his dad had killed himself. Like he was a child. Mm-hmm. In one of his dreams, he's a kid where he finds his dad.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that you get over that, because you I don't think you do. But it's not the immediate thing that he made it seem like it just happened yesterday, and then he had to move, and now he's out of the school, and everyone hates me.
Well, there
it's just
was
like he never got help.
Yeah, he never got help. I think that was the serious thing, is no one cared enough about him to get him help. Not even the guidance counselors or anything.
Well, yeah, but she wasn't there when it happened.
Yeah, well,
like at his fancy school.
At his fancy school.
But I think he gets therapy at his fancy school. Because the way he talked about...
He implied it. Well, there was an inheritance. His father, I guess, was a successful musician up to a point. And they'd been living, I guess, upper crust for a while. And once the inheritance ran out, they could no longer afford,
the mom.
The mom spent it all on drugs and alcohol. And they could no longer afford the school, had to move to a different part of town. And, it was hard to tell exactly how many years had passed. Probably, I don't know, at least 4 or 5, something like that.
I think so.
Maybe.
Yeah.
From what I inferred from the text, the private school handled things a little differently, maybe a little bit more discreetly even. I would imagine that it's a lot easier to bury those things when you're living in a sort of like a pampered environment as well. I think he was also able to comfort himself by wrapping himself in that kind of the pride and heritage and so forth. And once that was stripped away from him, he felt like he had to overcompensate and many other things. And there we go.
The one bullying that I found super believable was when they were like, "Mama, your dad killed himself." Blah, blah, blah. I was like, that sounds like teenagers.
Yeah.
Right there. Sounds like
Here's
teenagers.
a fact about you. Yep, you're right.
Remember your dad's dad? I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a teenager.
It was the same scene you were talking about in the lunchroom where Ari came up to him and was like,
"It smells like pee."
"Oh, it does smell like my piss." And people started chiming in going, "It's probably the suit that your dad killed himself in."
Eye roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which brings me to something we talked about before, the gasping and the recording. Yeah, that was...
Keith made a Facebook post once saying he audibly gasped. And so I read the whole thing and was like, where did he audibly gasp in? And I thought it might have been, there were 2 scenes that I thought it was, and it was neither of those.
It was fairly early on, even. It was the bullying. It was just like when he got to the part where he found his suit covered in piss, I was like, no. I was like, just, all right, everybody's dead. Kill him. But just, I was still on his side at that point. I mean, there was a lot of things that hadn't happened yet. When he go into his violent fantasies, I was like, that's reasonable.
I definitely kicked him in the dick.
Yeah.
Peed on my clothes. Yeah.
It was,
I was that level. If I were pushed to it.
The kids just stole shit from me when I was...
Oh, no.
And when I would go to gym class, they'd come back and stuff would be missing.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Yeah. My great-grandmother's bracelets.
Jesus Christ.
They were hand-beaded by her. They were just stupid elastic beads. I love them so much because they looked like cuffs. They looked like little cuffs. It was... Yeah. But still bothers me to this day, obviously.
That bothers me, hearing about that for the first time, I might add.
Because bullying brings it out of us, Keith.
Yeah.
Bullying's bad.
Yes.
Don't do it.
I mean, it's got its place in society.
Not gonna lie, I bullied a kid who was bullying my brother.
Revenge bullying.
I was like, you will stop. It stopped after a week, so I didn't have to do it.
But don't you think millennials are just soft pushovers because they weren't bullied enough? Obviously joking if you don't know me, because I am not on this podcast before.
I don't think I've ever bullied anybody. That doesn't surprise anybody, though. It shouldn't. Sorry, Keith, please continue.
I think you're bullying Keith right now.
Yeah, I know. Please continue, Keith.
Go, Keith.
I was piggybacking off of Jimmy's joke there and saying, that's the problem, is that people started talking about being bullied suddenly. Mm-hmm. So these people are soft. They're saying, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. No one told people not to do it when I was getting bullied.
Yeah.
Therefore, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, so that is one of the many things that are wrong with the world today, and specifically this country.
That's the only thing, though, that's wrong with the world today, isn't it? Yeah. Can you think of anything else?
That's it.
That's it. End the list.
I think it's a pretty good characterization of the things that are wrong in this country. But
well, I won't say it. So you want to get to ratings?
I suppose.
So I'm going to say 2 for this. Two different ratings for this.
Oh, okay. Not a 2, thank you, I guess.
Horror rating, obviously, and our entertainment rating. We should also do a J. Keith Jackson rating. So my J. Keith Jackson rating is, I'm going to say an 8, because it's not, I wouldn't say it's Kishi level, but entertainment value of Keith reading a book to me was about an 8.
Out of 10?
Out of 10, yeah.
Out of 50.
With, let's see, horror rating, had good horror in it. So I would say, horror, even with not just gore, but...
I think there's plenty of gore, though, if you wanted it.
Oh, yeah, there's plenty of gore. But there's also, the rape scenes, the bullying, all these things that are seen as horrific in modern-day culture. I'd say 6 or 7 for horror in a book.
There wasn't rape, was there?
He talked about rape.
Oh,
he
about
talked
her.
about raping Violet Sarkisian a lot. Every time. Every time he saw her.
True.
What?
I don't think that's what he fantasized about killing her, certainly, and there was a fantasy sex scene in which it was consensual. But
how do we know it's consensual?
Because it was fantasy. Why would he?
Because people get off on rape.
Okay. I'm not disputing that is a possibility. I'm just saying, having heard it recently today, it didn't seem like there was. Okay.
Do you want me to change my rating for it then?
No, I'm just. It was just the wording of that. There weren't actual. It was certainly not a respectful thing to take all the clothes off of Ashley before torturing her to death.
And
I mean, that was certainly a sexual assault, but I mean...
Okay.
Yeah.
The book, the actual book, I am going to give it a 5 out of 10. I probably won't listen to it again, even though Keith read it. And it had entertainment value up until a certain point. But, and the characters weren't likable. But it was, if you break it down into how, if you break it down as a technical book and not as Marianne's emotions about it, it's a fine book. It is like an unreliable narrator type book that's just not my jam. I'm sure it's other people's jams. It's just not mine. Jimmy, would you like to go next?
I'm a critic who has always refused to rate things on a scale because I hate it.
I hate doing it too, honestly.
I agree with your sentiments of Keith's performance was the best part. Like, I would rate that high. Horror, I don't feel qualified to rate it on a horror scale. If I'm rating it on technical writing, I would say I would probably rate it a little higher than you. I'd say maybe like a 7 or an 8 in terms of like how well written it was. But in terms of how much I liked it, yeah, I'd say like.
Do we want to talk about the one thing that we caught?
What?
I
could care less if we talk about it or not.
Keith was listening to it on his iPod out loud yesterday, and the line is, you want to read it?
I can tell you it was an hour and 46 minutes into the audiobook. I don't know what it was into the written.
Does he just say I could care less?
Yeah, as the narrator, like as the snobby narrator.
Yes. So
that's true. He is a snob.
Yeah, so he would not get it wrong.
The line is, a few kids around me are grumbling about our side losing, but I could care less.
Well, that's good you could care less, because because that means you still have stuff to care for.
I bumped on it immediately and texted Keith as I was listening. I mean, I've been texting him throughout, but that was one thing I definitely texted him.
We were listening to it last night. The line came up, silence for a bit. Could not care less is what I just... I was waiting for Keith to say something, but he immediately said Jimmy caught that too.
I mean, the pedantic person would say, but I could care less, maybe an accurate statement, but that's not the intention behind when it's always said wrong, so it's, you know.
Yep. Anywho. And so, yeah. That's Jimmy's ratings.
Sure.
So, for the book, like a 2. For the horror, a 3. Only because they put a cigarette in his eye. Maxwell's eye. I was like, ooh, crossing a line. Crossing a line!
Yeah, should have been a jewel. Come on. Get with the times.
And what was Keith?
Yeah.
Yeah, Keith, like an 8. I would gladly listen to more of Keith's books.
Me too.
Yep. Probably not nonfiction. I take that back. I listen to fiction. Sorry, I'm not super into nonfiction.
That's everybody. Keith,
Okay.
what about your rating?
Well,
you don't have to rate yourself.
It's,
Keith?
I think Keith would give himself a low rating based on how he stopped.
Knowing Keith, he's like, I'm 0.
-3.
-3. I suck so bad. I'm so bad.
With that voice.
Yeah. This is Keith and this is my demo reel. I'm so bad. Everything sucks.
I can't focus. What was my...
Okay, entertainment, horror, and Keith. So you're not rating Keith.
It's strange, as I said at the beginning, I had to go through this, and not to say like it was a chore. I mean, it is work, but I went through it probably 3 or 4 times at least, because of having to edit it and having to say it in the first place and having to, re-record a couple things here and there and listening to it again afterward. But it gave me, I think, a lot of perspective on what I thought and why. I appreciated some of the homages to Clockwork Orange, as I was saying. It makes me wonder how I would feel if I were seeing or reading Clockwork Orange for the first time today. If I'd still feel the same way about the character, the sexual assaults, and etc. And I don't think the author wanted us to like Lucien that way. Certainly not all the way through it. But it would have been a very different story if we'd done this from Maxwell's perspective. That would have been more traditional horror in that sense. We probably would have seen that story a lot of times. Really, just these kids that he befriends. It's like a Lost Boys sort of scenario. You know, the vampire movie, where you have, just in case, it could have been like Lost Boys, like Peter Pan.
Because I definitely went to Peter Pan. I was like, okay, what?
I was thinking more like just any of the ones where it's like good guy falls in with a bad crowd.
Yes. So the protagonist would have usually be the good guy falling in with a bad crowd. This time was actually the leader of that other gang, kind of seeing how that came together. And it's, I think in some cases, it's almost debatable whether or not they were the worst group in. Well, okay, by the end, certainly they were the worst. But but there were enough other bad people in it that...
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
I feel like this could be made into a movie with some tweaks.
Right.
But, because I can definitely see how this would look, you know.
That actually is, I guess, is another thing that I would have wanted to say about why I liked it. At least was just the way that he wrote it. It was very much like it felt like I was reading a screenplay in the sense of I knew exactly what I needed to say and how to say it by the way he wrote it. Mm-hmm. And
it was visually, I could always visualize what was happening.
Right.
It was never once where I was like, what? Mm-hmm. So that's why I gave it a higher rating. Because it was always drawing stuff in my mind. Mm-hmm.
And even though, and this is where I think the time and distance would have helped me too. Is, at the beginning, certainly as I started getting to those parts, I was, as I said, disappointed. It's like, no, I don't want you to do that though. I don't want him to do that. No, I wanted to like this person. Why are we doing that? And you know, having some distance, I realized I think that it was more thought provoking that way. This could have been far more disposable if he hadn't gone in certain directions. Mm-hmm. Even though it didn't make me feel good, it was still more horrific in some of the ways that he turned. So I'd give it a pretty high horror rating. I don't know if I can put a number on it, but certainly run Marianne like 6 or 7, maybe an 8 because of how. That's where the bias comes in, because I actually had to get in there and think like these people are thinking to say certain things, and that was sometimes not pleasant.
I can imagine. Keith started drinking gin and tonics after this.
Well,
like I like Lucien. I'm like, I'm questioning Keith now.
And he did murder that family, didn't he?
I know. Like all these things that just keep happening after you read that book. Yeah,
well, that's the point.
That's the point.
I'm glad the judge understood, though, that it was for an artistic project and let him off with community service.
Yeah.
There you go.
That was pretty good.
Keith,
rich people
eternally
slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
A week in solitary confinement.
Yeah.
So you can finish recording the book.
Yeah.
Luxury apartments.
So the main character, Lucien, his favorite drink is Bombay Sapphire Gin.
Stop it.
What?
God, everything about him, I was just like, throw him from a bridge.
He likes to drink Christmas trees.
Why do you, is there something about that drink that you know of in particular?
No, it just sounds fancy. And I was like, stop yourself. I have a flask that my father, it was my father's. I was like, stop.
One of the things I heard myself say today when re-listening that still made me laugh to say was when I had to say that, the equivalent of a suit from Walmart or Seagram's Extra Dry.
Yeah. That's like the Family Guy, the long bottom tooth guy.
But yeah.
So we've given our ratings. What do we want to promote?
This, I guess. Hopefully people will still listen to it if they haven't yet. No, I'm hoping that you, well, yeah. Anyway, whether or not you've listened to the book yet or not, I mean, I'm glad you're listening to this discussion about it, so somebody even knows what I've done.
We have the author coming on after our conversation.
Yeah.
So all these things will be positives.
I definitely want to listen to that.
Yeah,
me too.
There are certainly things I want to ask. I told him in the email that I didn't want to like pressure him to say something definitive if he didn't want it to be like, yes, this definitely happened here. This was definitely supernatural. This wasn't. But I'm really curious to hear if there is an answer. I have my theories, but hopefully I'll have had time to edit this audio so I can play Jessica's comments verbatim for him.
Whoops.
No, I don't.
Sorry. It's not, but I did preface it with, it's not my kind of story.
No, that is very,
really
that is very,
against
no, that is very important.
As long as we can break it down, like, I mean, I said technically, of course, it's not my type of book either. If I was to give it an emotional rating, it'd be much lower. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to do my technical rating because, you know, it's a podcast. and I don't want to shit on the book. It is just because I don't like it doesn't mean other people won't like it. So exactly. Doing long tirades, like being mean about a book, is not helpful because other people might like it. But Jimmy, what do you have to promote?
Well, I host It's All Been Tricked before with Stephen Woosley, and Keith's on it almost every episode.
Yep.
And Marianne's been on it a bunch, and Jessica's been on it before. And then, of course, It's All Been Done Radio Hour, which is how I met Keith when I cast him in that. He's a lead character. And both Marianne and Jessica have got started on that as well. So,
What is that?
Both podcasts you can check out. Go to IABDpresents.com.
I would like Jessica to describe the
fish.
Okay, yeah, I was like,
I was doing Angel.
Oh, mine's a fish. I'm not really in anything coming up. Well, I'm in 2X Sketch tonight, but...
Too late.
There's always something going on at Mad Lab. Go to madlab.net.
Yeah,
check out what's happening.
I think this is going out on Tuesday, so
Lipstick's still running.
Oh, yeah.
If it goes out this Tuesday, then Radio Hour has a show on Saturday. Make it a double feature. Stay for your lipstick.
Yeah.
Do both. With our own Dallas Ray, we'll be in both.
Yeah.
Fool.
Yep, so it's all been on Radio Hour at Mad Lab at 4:45.
5 p.m.
5 p.m.
Radio Hour's at 5.
Yeah. But usually
and Lipstick's at 8. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we don't have an intro. We don't have an opener this month.
Right, so.
You're not doing the previously on?
Not this month.
Oh.
Don't be put off.
This is a long show. We
don't
have time to prepare.
In the lobby.
Because it's the Christmas show.
We've got a couple new songs.
Oh, nay, yes.
So
my dad's been asking about that.
The vagina puppets are not for the Christmas show, then?
No.
Okay.
They're for lipstick. They're in the lobby. They're decorated nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Lipstick is a play by Lane Stanley. I remember that because I keep going Lane Staley in my head.
Yep, I do too.
Of Alice in Chains fame for some people who might
and
not
there
know
may
that.
or may not be a demon unicorn in it, just saying.
Uh-huh.
Well, there may or may not be a demon unicorn in Black Heart Boys Choir.
True. See, it all comes together.
Touche.
So, I have this podcast that you're listening to. Make sure you like and subscribe to all of our stuff. We're on Twitter at Macabre Review. We are on Facebook at Marianne's Macabre Review. And you can always email me through any of those ways or direct message me in any of those ways if you want. If you want to come on the show, or if you would like to yourself suggest something. We have some suggestions from Twitter that have come in from one of our Twitter followers, and we have a few other things. So,
do you have an audiobook?
I don't have an audiobook.
Not you. I meant
Keith.
Oh.
Whoever's listening.
Yeah. Do you have
Did you also narrate a horror-themed audiobook?
Do you have?
I did.
Keith, do you have something horror-related? Don't forget, these are the things we're still looking for. Castle Rock Season 1 and possibly Season 2 if you've watched it. Also, the combined works of H.P. Lovecraft. We also have Stephen King. We're trying to get some people together for a Shining / Dr. Sleep podcast. Also, what was the other one? Annabelle Comes Home, because I forgot about that one. Yeah, we should watch it. Cool. All right. Sounds like we've got a few coming up. Would like to hear from y'all. Let me know you're out there, and let us know that we're not shouting into the void. Keith, add echo to that. Thank you.
You have to say it louder.
Void.
Let us know we're not shouting into the void.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate you all coming out and listening to Keith's book, and
I appreciate that too.
Giving your opinions. Thanks for all the things, and of course, I always listen to your books. So,
wow.
Anywho, all right, everybody, have a good night. Bye.
Bye. Oh, wait, I just got it. Thanks for all the fish. That's what Jessica was doing.
Third movement. Aria of the Author.
I'm Marianne. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And I am Keith, of course.
Well, I just want to start out with a few questions, more personal questions, like, tell us about yourself. You know, I'm sure Keith and I have both read your bio, but I'm sure our listeners might not have read your bio yet.
Fair enough, yeah. My name's Curtis M. Lawson. I live in Salem, Massachusetts. I've been I've been serious about writing since about 2007 or so, 2006. I started off doing comic books, mostly self-published stuff. And then about 2015, I wrote my first novel, and that was much more successful than anything I had done with comics. So I kind of switched over into writing prose. And I live here with my wife and our son and our dog. When I'm not writing, I like to play tabletop RPGs. I like underground music. Other than that, I'm pretty boring.
I love D&D, so what type of tabletops do you play?
I started off, nowadays I mainly play D&D or Pathfinder with my wife and my kid. I started off playing D&D when I was like 12, but, throughout the years I played all sorts of games. I think my favorite was, there was a White Wolf superhero game called Aberrant, which I really enjoyed.
I played that. That's good. I love it.
Yeah, I loved Aberrant. That's probably my favorite, but, I played Rifts, I played the Call of Cthulhu games, all sorts of things. So me and my friends, we used to play at least once a week up until I was like 35 or something like that. And we'd try all different systems and such. So
that's nice. I still play.
I'd like to again.
That's super fun. I'm glad to know that about you.
So who did you read growing up?
That you got your inspiration from, or just who you liked?
When I was a kid, I didn't really read much as far as like books go. When I was a kid, I think what really sparked reading for me was comics. Mm-hmm. When I was about 12 years old, at the corner store they had these packs of like Marvel Comics like trading cards, and that kind of sparked my interest in it. And I got my dad to take me to some comic book store in downtown Boston, and I just fell in love with it. So that's really what sparked my interest in reading was Marvel Comics, and then I got into Image and Vertigo and all that. Yeah. And then in high school, I would read select books. Once again, going back to Dungeons and Dragons, I got really into like the Dragonlance novels.
Oh my gosh, I love Dragonlance. Yes.
Yeah, so I got really into that. I got into the Ravenloft books, and then I don't know, maybe my junior year of high school, I had the opportunity to do, they wanted to put me in like an advanced English class, but I chose this, I guess it would have been considered it was considered kind of a remedial class, but it was all science fiction literature, and that sounded way more interesting to me. So I did that, and that exposed me to a lot of like science fiction classics, and like kind of dystopian classics. So we did like 1984 and Animal Farm, Anthem by Ayn Rand. We did a bunch of stuff like that. And at the same time, I had started getting into, older books that I, discovered through movies, stuff like A Clockwork Orange and such. So that's kind of what I read when I was a teenager. And then There was the occasional, people are going to hate me here. I'm not a huge fan of Stephen King. I like select stuff of King, but a lot of his stuff is not lacks brevity for me.
Yes, we've had that conversation before. Yeah.
Yeah, so I really like his short fiction, and there's certain, I love it. I think it's like a nearly perfect novel, but I tried to read Tommyknockers when I was young, and I got like 100 pages in, and they just tripped over the tip of the spaceship at 100 pages in at that point. So I started, I started looking deeper into horror past King. I found Clive Barker, and then Lovecraft, and all those older guys. And I think Lovecraft is what really drew me in, though. I actually kind of found Lovecraft backwards. I had an interest in like occultism and such when I was a teenager, and they had this occult section at Barnes & Noble, and I just grabbed whatever looked cool. And they had this version of the Necronomicon, which was it's kind of like this famous fraudulent thing, and written by some mysterious guy named Simon. And through that, I kind of stumbled into Lovecraft. And once I started reading Lovecraft, I just completely fell in love with that weird fiction sort of thing.
Nice.
And I wasn't writing at that point. I was mainly playing music back then. I played in bands up until I was about 25 or so. But I always liked to write. I just never did it seriously. I'd, write down like ideas for comic scripts or, little dumb poems and stuff like that. But it wasn't until I was about 25 and my last band broke up that I was like, I want to do something more solitary. I want to do something that if it succeeds or fails, it's just on me. And so I decided to try and start writing since, I gained a love of literature from, like Lovecraft and Barker and things like that.
It's funny, my window of being in bands was around like 25 to 35 or something like that.
All right.
So, another question. I ask this of all our special guests that come on. What is your favorite genre of horror, and what's your least favorite horror genre?
I guess, for my favorite, weird fiction / cosmic horror, weird fiction is kind of a nebulous term.
Yeah.
But it's, it's more of a feel, I guess. But I love cosmic horror, obviously, like Lovecraft's a big influence on me. And then there's this book, Southern Gods by John Horner Jacobs, that was a big influence on me. And I think the thing that attracts me about cosmic horror is really the stakes of it, and kind of how badly the odds are against you. Yeah. You're just this kind of mortal being, this flawed mortal being up against these things that are so huge that they barely notice your existence. And that for some reason, I'm drawn to that.
I like it.
And then my least favorite is probably, like, at this point, I'd say zombie fiction. I'm really sick of zombie stuff.
Yeah.
I'd be happy if I just, never saw any zombie stuff ever again at this point.
Yeah. I get it. It's overrun the culture right now. And it really needs something more to make it, to reinvigorate it again.
Exactly. And I think I was reading The Walking Dead before the show and such, and I loved the comic. And I tried to get into the show, but I wasn't feeling it as much. But I think that because of Robert Kirkman and what he did, everybody was like, let's do what Kirkman's doing instead of trying to do something really interesting with it. You just got all this, kind of post-apocalyptic survival zombie stuff that popped up around there. And I don't think any of it was as good as what Kirkman was doing.
Yeah, I get it. So I'll let Keith take over now because I'll pop in with questions and stuff. But we met with some people yesterday and got a review of the books and stuff. So Keith,
I don't feel nearly as organized now. Well, I will start by saying that when I first started reading the book, it started taking some turns, and I think what summed it up for me was it wasn't going where I wanted it to go or where I would have expected it to go, but by the end I was glad that it went there. I was glad there was something different. And there's once we really started getting into the meat of what was going to happen, I could tell that it was probably going to be controversial for certain reasons, which you might be able to guess. And I wondered, it's the thing that I worried the most about when I got there was I wondered how people were going to respond to the school shooting aspect of it. I wondered if people were going to think you were being too sympathetic toward the idea of someone who would do something like that. And what do you think? I mean, what was your intention going into it? Did it just sort of end up there?
So that was, I was definitely concerned that how people would react to the school shooting aspect, but that was the point of the book, really. It's such a big problem, and I have an 11-year-old son, and it's something I'm concerned about. But also looking back, I had a pretty troubled childhood, and looking back in high school, I graduated the year before Columbine, and I remember when it happened, thinking like, could I have done that? Like, was I a few bad days away from doing something like that? And I don't think I was, but the fact that that even occurred to me, and that I could, I don't know. I've read a lot about the Columbine stuff since it happened, so I don't know that the bullying that they say happened occurred to the extent that it did. But initially, that was the big story, that these kids had been bullied really badly. And I remember, having a lot of violent fantasies in high school, and so there was a level of sympathy that I felt. And as a father, that's a very conflicting thing to me, especially because, my son, he's young, but he's fairly well-adjusted, much more well-adjusted than I was as a child. And I'm just thinking about someone who's not well-adjusted lashing out at him and all these other innocent people. And I think that when we talk about school shootings, when we discuss it, everybody is talking about gun control, and that's a thing that we need to talk about, but it seems to be the only thing that we're really talking about. And I don't think that this is going to stop by laws or a lack of laws. I think that we need to understand the root of the problem and what's driving young people to do these really horrible, violent things. So that's kind of what I wanted to explore with Boys Choir is, what makes a person get to the point where they would do this? And I think that there has to be something more than it's just, a bad kid, or there's access to gun, or there's video games. I think that there has to be something deeper that's wrong with our culture for this to keep happening so much. And I don't have an answer. I don't know what that is, but I thought that by exploring some of my own feelings of disenfranchisement when I was young, and the things that kind of made me feel on the fringe, that maybe at least I could scratch the surface of what makes young people feel so kind of pushed aside that they would lash out in this way.
Yeah. Well, did you grow up in Massachusetts? Or did you go to school there? Was there a school like that you went to? Or?
I grew up in Massachusetts. I didn't go to a school like that per se. I went to a trade school. So we were like learning a trade one week, and then we were in academics the other week. So it wasn't quite like that, but I mean, some of the experiences were very similar. I didn't make it easy for myself in school. I wasn't this like weird classical music kid in suits all the time like Lucien is, but I was, I was this black metal kid who, I had long hair, and I was in a leather jacket and like boots with metal plates on them, and and I never, I made a point to show that I was different from everyone, which is, kind of what Lucien does in the book is, he accentuates, how different he is and how apart. So I did that same kind of thing, and I had, I had fairly, bad reactions because of that. There were definitely people who didn't appreciate how different I was.
There always are, it seems.
Yeah. We were talking yesterday. Every single one of us that came to the podcast had been bullied and one of them had even had their clothes peed on, just like Lucien.
Really? Yeah. That's terrible.
Yeah.
I had a kid who lit my hair on fire. And that was the worst that I got. But that's all right, because I kind of wrote him into the book and shot him in the face. So.
I related with Lucien up to a certain point, certainly. And I think I mentioned yesterday that there were certainly points where I was like, I'm not sorry to see these kids get hurt. Yeah. Some of the bullies in particular, certainly. But that makes me think about a couple of other things where I started parting ways with the character, certainly. Attitudes towards women, for example. And I think that really bothered Marianne and Jessica in particular. I
think that when I started planning out this book, I did a lot of planning about themes and character and just different mechanics I wanted to use, and I wanted to make sure that he wasn't a completely sympathetic character. I wanted to give him these things that, beyond just the violence, to show that, he's not a good person. He's not the good guy. Like he's not a Byronic hero of some sort. He's a bad guy in his own right.
I want to say you certainly want to avoid something like that if you are exploring this topic. You don't want to make it seem like you are like championing these people,
Exactly. And, as much as I do sympathize with kids who get into these dark places to a certain extent, it's only up to a certain extent. And if I looked at a lot of interviews, I watched a lot of video about mass violence and school shootings, and some of the situations were sadder for the shooters than others, I would say, but some of them, they've had bad home situations or whatnot, but you can tell that in most of these cases, they weren't good kids. There was something beyond just being bullied or having a bad home life. There was something wrong beyond that in a lot of the cases. So I wanted to show that, he wasn't a good guy.
Right. So Jessica and I had a bit of a disagreement yesterday about some things, and I think that certain kinds of labels are dangerous, and I was thinking about putting in some sort of disclaimer at the beginning about it, but one word that kept getting thrown around a lot about Lucien was incel, which I personally don't think fits in with that kind of agenda necessarily. Certainly he didn't treat women well. His friends didn't have high regard for them in certain ways, but I don't think that he was out to campaign against them in some way.
I agree with you. So this has come up in a few reviews too, where he's been described as an incel and such, and that wasn't my intention. I have weird issues about that term. I think it's an unfortunate term in general, both for the men who coined it, but also its use as an insult. I feel
right.
Using it as an insult is, you're essentially attacking someone because of their lack of sexual prowess or their lack of attractiveness. Mm-hmm. It just seems like a pretty crappy term in general to use as an insult, especially if someone's not, doesn't have that sort of agenda, if they're just kind of like a crappy person.
Yes.
I feel like there are better reasons to, I wouldn't say better reasons to attack people, but there are better things to criticize about those kinds of people.
Yeah, it's, in my opinion, it's a little reductive, especially in this case. Kind of takes away from the point of what's going on there. It's not about him trying to get revenge on all women. It is just lashing out at like the society in general, the town.
Exactly. The adults. I think that subconsciously, maybe he definitely has some issues with women, I think, but it's not like this deep like hatred, like that's not his agenda. But I think that there are probably issues with women brought on by obviously his relationship with his mother.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, I'll be honest, like, my relationship with my mother has been troubled most of my life. So I can see that kind of subconsciously pouring in from me, that part of it. But he's also immature. He hasn't had any experience with women outside of his mother. He went to, this fancy private school that I don't think I ever say in there that it was an all-boys school, but I just kind of always assumed it was an all-boys school. And this is his first real, experience around women while he's in mid-adolescence, and he just doesn't know how to handle any of his emotions. Never mind when he's feeling hormonal about it too.
Yeah, that reminded me of something else that came up yesterday. Just a more of a minor thing, just something that didn't seem clear. How much time had passed between his father hanging himself and him having to leave the private school?
I think his father hung himself when he was 12 years old and left the school the year before. So he was 15. He's 16 in boys choir because he skipped a grade.
Oh, so did I. That's weird.
All right. I think it only mentions that once in there. But he, so it's been, at this point, it's been almost 4 years since his father had hung himself.
Okay. I thought from some of the dream sequences, it seemed like he might have been younger or something when it happened, but do you have any thoughts, Marianne?
No.
Okay. I'm trying to look through some of my notes here about it. I should have looked up the exact passage for something. Well, I guess I'm getting into some of the story-related things now. I remember, for example, when Lucian was looking up Amducius, the passage mentioned something about the demon usually having familiars. And I wondered if that was something like a role that Asher and JC started to come into. Were they possessed in some way, or was that a reference to what would end up being the people who were shooting back during the end?
Honestly, none of that was intentional. It's kind of cool to think of it that way. Yeah. But I literally pulled that passage from like the was it the books of King Solomon or whatever, the demonic. It's some old occult text about goetic demons, and that's just like verbatim pulled from that.
Nice.
So it's kind of cool that you could see it as Asher and JC or even the police and such at the end, though.
So that would get into some of my questions. Was as an unreliable narrator, did you feel that there was supernatural stuff throughout this whole thing, or was it just Lucian kind of losing it?
Can't be both.
That was where I was. I don't know. I felt like there was evidence that there had to have been something happening. I mean, there is. I think I started to allude to some of this yesterday. I mean, I've felt like I've unlocked some subconscious things every now and then. You'll be able to, like certain creative outlets, certain muses that sort of come up where it feels like you can't come up with those things on your own consciously. Like the music he was composing, it seemed, was it just him being that brilliant in the back of his head and things were just kind of happening, or was something really leading him? I don't know.
I kind of left it nebulous, obviously on purpose, and it's kind of nebulous to me. But I have a weird relationship with myth and occultism and things like that. I'm definitely an empirical atheist, mostly, but I feel that even things like the ideas of ceremonial magic or chaos magic, things like this, I don't view them in a literal true way, or even different gods from different traditions in an empirical way, but I still see them as valuable psychological tools and true in their own right. Just because something doesn't exist empirically doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
I know what you mean. I think
probably not a great answer.
Sorry, what was it?
I said that's probably not a great answer.
Oh, well, no, I mean, I kind of understand. I probably consider myself agnostic, really, and I found that there's a certain value in, like, say, a placebo. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Effect. The ritual can kind of unlock other things or give yourself permission to go an extra mile or something, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that, I don't know if you guys watch much, I don't know what you'd call them, I guess like intellectual dark web type guys, but there was a debate between Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, and I think what I really got out of that, Sam Harris is saying, well, this is literally not true, so it has no value. I'm
sorry, are they philosophers or authors or?
So Sam Harris is, I don't know what you call him. They're both they're both academic type folks.
Okay.
Sam Harris writes a lot of stuff on atheism. I don't know what his actual job is beyond that. And Jordan Peterson is like a really controversial kind of like pop psychology figure. And, Sam Harris is like, well, this is empirically not true, so it's damaging. And Jordan Peterson's point of view is like, well, just because it's not true doesn't mean it doesn't have value. And that's kind of where I come from. Just because Amducius isn't real or may not be real doesn't mean that the construct of Amducius isn't just as powerful.
Mm.
But honestly, I think it's really up to the reader to decide.
I kind of thought that might end up being the case, but still had to ask. I mean, it's useful to know that you feel that way about it, so it can't really just be a definitive, none of this was real, nothing happened, Yeah,
and one of my opinions on art really is that it doesn't belong to you once you let it out into the world. And it once it's out there, it belongs to everyone, and they can make of it whatever they want to or need to at that point. So,
yeah.
I like it.
One of the things I was remarking on yesterday was, even as I was going through it, usually sort of passively speaking as I'm recording, these things are kind of, sorry, let me back up a bit. When I'm recording an audiobook, sometimes I don't process what is actually happening, even though I need to understand certain context to, give the right inflection. And I think I kind of got lucky for certain parts, like the scene with Asher, and they're looking at the assault rifle. Certain things I wasn't even making the connections at the time. Until, several chapters later, and when I'm going back and editing, and I was just surprised even. Like the oppressive percussions in chapter 23 was when I was starting to get it. It was like, oh my God, wait a minute, wait, what? Oh, the demons are, that kind of thing. Those are the police. And I went back and was like, okay, I guess I did say that the right way. Another minor thing, though. There's an expression, I don't know if that was regional, when Asher said that they should drag Donnie Hammond out into the night and the fog.
So that was one of the things I did with Asher, and I tried to put a lot of this stuff in subtly so that it would, I don't like beating people over the head with things, but, Asher's this like kind of like weird underground music guy, and I wanted Asher to be kind of, beyond Amducius, like kind of the second devil on Lucian's shoulder, so to speak. And so the night in the fog is actually an old reference going back to the Nazis where like, people would disappear into the night in the fog in the Third Reich.
Interesting.
So somebody like just vanished, because of a political statement or something. They'd say, oh, they went into the night in the fog.
Okay.
So where Asher's like, he's into all this really fringe stuff. And when I don't know what kind of bands you played in, but when I was playing in like black metal bands and punk bands, there were always these fringe guys around who were into like anything that like they shouldn't be, There was always this hodgepodge of stuff. So they were like into like Satanism and, random like different paganisms and Nazi stuff and like half an anarchist, so, and that's kind of what I wanted to do with Asher, was have him be this confused kid who's just latching on to anything that he's not supposed to be part of.
Jessica came up with it, well, not came up with, but mentioned the term, which is probably fairly recent, edgelord, which I thought summed it up.
Yeah, that kind of sums it up. And that is a recent term, but that kind of sums up the type of the type of character that I was going for with him.
So one of the things that I think Marianne really appreciated in particular, and me too. I was mentioning this yesterday. The vivid way that you wrote things, I think, was very helpful when I was going through it. I always felt like I knew what I needed to say and how to say it because of the way it was written. I wondered if you wrote it with the idea of it being adapted into something at some point. I mean, it's
into a movie or a graphic novel or something.
I didn't go at it from that point, but I think people say this about a lot of my work, and I think it comes from the fact that I wrote comics for almost like 10 years before I started writing novels or short stories, and I just have I have a naturally kind of visual storytelling type of technique or style. People have said that my work is cinematic, and I think that just comes down to studying visual storytelling so intensely. I got really, really into writing comics and the craft of it, and I've read countless books about visual storytelling and like books on directing, and so I think that I have this kind of intuitive cinematic aspect to my writing, and that's probably what was coming across, I would say.
That does make sense, certainly, especially the comic background.
I appreciate it. I really liked it. That's one of the things I mentioned is I just knew, as I was listening to the book, I always had the visuals in my head. There was never a moment where I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to go do this other thing or anything. I was always brought in by the book while I was listening, and there wasn't any...
Didn't feel like there was dead air.
Yeah, it didn't feel like there was a description that didn't match, or there was a line that took me out of the book or anything. It was just, I was engrossed the entire time listening to it. I think I listened to it in like a day or two. Like starting like Sunday evening. I think it was launched on Sunday. I bought it Sunday, and then immediately started listening to it that evening, and then it was probably finished in the next day or two.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So what else? Oh yeah, just another passing thing. Well, A Clockwork Orange, actually, that was around college is when I discovered that, and that was probably one of my favorite books and movies at the time. So I noticed some of the speech patterns, or at least like the way the chapters would begin with Lucian sort of routinely mentioning what time it was, what day it was. It kind of felt like there was the influence there. I don't know if that was intentional, but
yeah, it was a huge influence on multiple levels. One of the things I did when I started planning out this book, I'm a meticulous planner with stuff. I can't just start writing and be like with a loose idea. I have to have note cards and notebooks and files, and so I really studied the structure of Fight Club, A Clockwork Orange, and American Psycho. And those were the three that I really tore apart, looking for, how they reused themes and kind of leitmotifs and how they were structured. But A Clockwork Orange was probably the biggest influence all around. Obviously, there's the classical music part. And then there's... how you said the structure of Lucian, like introducing the chapter, it's Monday and I'm in gym class or whatever. And I think that one of the reasons I chose to do kind of like a weird classical music subculture was there was something I read with Anthony Burgess where he said that he'd chosen to make up his own slang there in A Clockwork Orange because he wanted it to be timeless. He didn't want the book to age 10 years and then no one talked like that anymore and no one read it.
And they're saying groovy, it's,
Yeah. So I thought that if I just chose some random subculture, and at this point I'm 40 years old, I don't even know what subcultures there are anymore. So, but if I chose some subculture that exists today, that's going to be, gone in 10 years, and the book's going to be fairly, it's going to feel irrelevant. Right. So I took that cue from Clockwork Orange and created this, weird classical music subculture because it's something that it's not real, but it will never go away either because, classical music has lasted this long for a reason. And then obviously A Clockwork Orange deals with a lot of the same themes as far as youth violence and, young people with a lack of empathy, things like that. And I liked how deeply you were able to get into Alex's mind in that book and in the movie, and how intimate it feels.
Yeah, that's, I guess, one of the other advantages of writing in first person for something like that.
Yeah, and I felt like that was a risk. I feel like I took a lot of risks with this book, but, I was like, I want to do an unreliable narrator. I want to do first person present tense. I'm like, these are the things that everyone hates. And I'm going to have it about a school shooting. So
you even did one of the things that I usually bump on or get annoyed by is the telling what's going to happen at the end of the book at the beginning.
Yeah.
Spoilers, but I still I enjoyed the story unfolding.
I have to tell a story about what happened when I was reading the book. I knew Keith had already read it. So in the middle, right before Maxwell, I walk in. I was like, if Maxwell dies, I'm not fucking listening to the rest of your book. Ever. You gotta tell me right now. And he refused to tell me. And so, and 20 minutes later, he's gone. And I came back in. I'm like, fine, I'm gonna finish reading it, but. But dang it.
That was a really emotional scene to write because Maxwell is really the only decent person in the book.
Right. I actually
maybe Ashley.
Who knows? Didn't get much to do.
I guess not.
But I talked to Keith about it, and I was like, if anybody hurts my precious cinnamon roll, Maxwell, and then I finished the book and went on. And someone else had made reference to Maxwell being our cinnamon roll, and I was like, ah!
I saw that too, and I saw that there were two reviews with that, and I said, did I call him a cinnamon roll?
No, he's just like the perfect baked bun that we all love. It's in that culture of fan fiction. There's one character that you love the most that you never ever want to see anything hurt, and that was our Maxwell.
And interesting thing about the Maxwell thing, a lot of this was inspired by the 90s black metal scene and all these guys in Scandinavia and Germany and stuff burning churches and murdering each other. And that's something I was really intrigued with when I was a teenager, and I played in black metal bands, although we were a lot tamer in the US. And there was this this story. They just did a movie for Lords of Chaos, which I think focuses on the Norwegian stuff, but the book goes into all the stuff that happened throughout the world. And there was some band in Germany, and they were just kids. They were high school kids, and one of them, there was some kind of nerdy kid who was like a hanger-on of their band or something like that, and they wouldn't let him hang out, so he tried to blackmail them, and they lured him out to the woods, and they strangled him to death. And that was kind of the inspiration for that whole scene. Real life murder that happened with this band in Germany.
Yeah, there was plenty of gore for Marianne's sake too, I think.
Yeah, I know. I'm as a friend quoted me, a gore hound. So
I love horror, and this book did not. It gave me all the horror that I needed. I love it.
So, one of our people yesterday, Jimmy, he is not a horror person, but he read it because Keith narrated it, and he was like, well, on horror, I'm going to give this a 12 or something. I forget what he refused to rate anything. So,
yeah,
but
with numbers,
with numbers. But he was, he was not a horror person. Jessica and I are probably big horror fans. Keith is. I've pulled him reluctantly into the thing.
I had a background before I knew you, but I wasn't really focusing on it as much, except until this, because we have to, for that reason. So,
But anywho, yeah, go ahead, Keith.
No, that was pretty much it. I mean,
is there anything you want to ask us?
Yeah, or anything you want to promote or anything like that, or just...
Yeah.
Well, I keep thinking about it. I keep going back to the incel thing, and in my head, just want to address that a little bit more in the fact that I think that there comes... I don't know what kids are like now. I have an 11-year-old, but I guess I should say I don't know what teenagers are like now. I feel like it's a different world than when I was growing up, but I do feel that there probably still is with young people kind of problems with how they learn how to deal with the opposite sex, especially with young men. And I think that's especially in like a public school setting. And I think that there's a lack of maturity. It's something that develops with maturity, is learning how to treat other people, especially when you're kind of like plagued with, these feelings for the first time. I don't know what I'm really trying to get at here as much as...
Well, I do have a suggestion, really, if I may.
Yeah.
I think a lot of things have gotten worse because of the internet and the ability to communicate instantly and connect with people who you wouldn't ordinarily be able to connect with. And, that would be a good thing on the surface. But when you have something that is something that you should be able to mature out of like that, certain kinds of attitudes, or, you're sort of deprived of that natural learning process you might get with having to keep things to yourself for a bit, and maybe see what works. And so now you have people who are encouraging you to feel and act on the worst things you want to say, or express.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point.
So, yeah, I think that is what some of that movement is born out of, many other movements. And that's unfortunate, and I'm not sure what can be done about it anymore. Man. We had a sort of a political discussion after the mic was off yesterday.
Yeah.
About other things that were, tangentially related.
Right.
But we don't want to get into. But bullying certainly, I think, is more topical.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway.
So, as far as other things, I noticed that you said that there was a point when you were editing the book where you heard yourself gasp.
I asked the same thing. I brought up two things with Keith. Like, was it this one? And I thought when Maxwell died, or was it at this other point? And it was neither of them. Keith.
Well, I mean, it is surprising, like, how early on that happened. I think I was I was still shocked by things that happened later. But this was just something very simple. It was just when he got back to the locker room and found that somebody had pissed on his suit. I just had to stop for a second and say, oh my God, we're going there. Okay, this is going to start getting bad. I mean, it's just something that really appalled me. I was still, I guess, really relating to Lucian in a certain way. And before the seal had been officially broken, I was just kind of really upset on his behalf there.
And when did the seal break, so to speak? Like, when did you stop kind of relating to him? Was it before the Maxwell thing?
Well, before that. It's hard to say.
I'm gonna venture a guess.
Go ahead.
Was it with the stuff with Violet?
I suppose so.
Yeah.
Which stuff with Violet? So one of the things I try to do with this is I really tried to escalate things kind of exponentially. So it escalated quicker and quicker. In his descent into kind of cruelty and madness. So obviously, I think his first encounter with Violet could turn people off, absolutely. But was it that first encounter, or was it?
No, not even that. I mean, it was a little later. This was still at the point where it felt like there were several other books that this might have turned into at that point. I could have even seen it being one of those kinds of
love story.
Yeah, will they or won't they, mismatched pair thing, or we find these things in common. Let's join the Glee Club after all. There's many kinds of things that could have happened there. It was when he was definitely having the violent imagery about her.
That That was when I'm like, I'll go on the Lucian train, and then I checked out immediately when he was having, in the record store, having sex with her and then killing her in the next flash. So I was just like, nope. And I'm off the Lucian train. We're on to see where the Maxwell train goes with us now. Oh no, he's dead.
It's interesting. I've seen from the reviews and people who have reached out to me, this isn't true across the board, but just as a generalization, I found that like men who have, come from kind of either they were like geeky or subculture or whatever, they come to me and they're like, I totally relate to this guy. And like, I even like I hate to say this, but I even relate to like the bad stuff and the violent fantasies. Like, like this is such like a cautionary tale about what, the bad things that can happen to young men. And then a lot of the women who have reached out to me, it's kind of the same thing. They kind of lose, they kind of stop rooting for him at that point. But at the same point, they like the kind of roller coaster of like feeling sympathetic towards him and then like feeling this like deep derision towards him. There's almost like this enjoyment to the ride of hating him and sympathizing with him.
It's like, well, I guess he's going to die now because of the prologue, so hey, I guess that's a good point.
I probably really started checking out when he was acting on some of the the violent things, when he actually really started hurting people. But also, not being white, I could relate to some of the things that he wasn't picking up on, or not relate to. I was able to see, like when Maxwell was reacting to him on the subway, for example, about the Holocaust. That's where I started realizing, okay, I can kind of understand the emotional disconnect there, but at some point you need to be able to empathize a little better than that. It was
absolutely.
It was still kind of, if I have to admit, it was still kind of funny to me. It was it's humorous because I could tell the kind of character that you were building there. And when he would say things like that, it was just kind of entertaining to hear me saying it too. But and like the thing with Mr. Jackson in the classroom, when I actually sympathize with Lucian in the sense that this person is focusing on the wrong aspect of what he said, but I would still have preferred that Lucian understood why that was still
why
bad.
It was the wrong thing to say.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
But
yeah, and that's I really like to kind of delve into those kind of nebulous lines in my work. I wouldn't consider myself a political writer at all, but I like to kind of explore blurred lines and, blur gray aspects of morality and such. So I think that, one of the things I really wanted to touch on with Boys Choir was empathy in general. And you have both, Lucian's inability to empathize, and you have the rest of the world's inability to empathize with him. And I think that's at the core of a lot of our problems, is just this shared lack of empathy from a different point of view.
Yeah, that was you took the words right out of my mouth there. I was going to say, when you started that point, it's just people just don't really seem to be able to step out of their own shoes for a bit and
they don't want
back
to.
Off. There's that too. Just
they have the ability, they just don't want to. It's more comfortable to be where they're at, and that's a frustrating thing for me to read and hear about and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's dangerous on a society level. Like I said, I didn't intend this to be a political book as much as there are definitely kind of political aspects. It was more of to get into the psychology of these things. But I think that, it's an important thing to talk about. Is I think back to, there was, I forget his name, the guy who played Magneto in the newer X-Men movies. I think, no, it wasn't him. It was the dude who played General Zod, I think, in the Superman movie. Yeah, he was saying something about, if your parents voted for Trump, like disown them and never talk to them again. And then like you hear like these similar things from the other side, and it's that the fact that we can't like talk to each other anymore about like our differences, it really worries me.
Yeah, that's one of the things we were talking about afterward yesterday. Just there doesn't really seem to be a way back sometimes, so I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, the empathy thing was definitely, or the lack of empathy thing was something I definitely wanted to touch on. And the other, what else was I going to say about reviews? I got a review from Publishers Weekly. They didn't like the book. I don't know if you saw that.
I did not.
But, yeah, they said fluid writing and perfect pacing cannot save this book from its insufferable main character or something like that.
Okay. Well, that's bad, but also relieving to hear that it's not such a... Jessica had very much the same problem, I think.
Mm-hmm. And, she was like, I can't stand the character, so therefore I'm going to listen to the book on 2x speed.
Yeah.
He's kind of checked out there at the beginning, but...
Yeah, and there was definitely... there's this thing called Nightworms. They do these boxes of like books every month, and you sign up, and they do all these reviews and stuff. And one of the girls from Nightworms reviewed it, and she had a similar problem. She just didn't like the character at all, and that was one of the ones that I mentioned earlier that mentions is an incel or whatnot.
Right.
But she also couldn't get behind Amducius either. She thought the unicorn aspect was kind of silly.
Silly? Well,
I don't know about that.
Yeah, that was like one of the main attractions, I think, for Marianne and I. And
for
I
most
think
people at the podcast, they're like, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, if it's a genre. I think I mentioned to you at the very beginning. It reminded me just even the artwork and the premise, the synopsis, reminded me of like an anime that I might want to watch about some classical music obsessed main character and dealing with demons and the idea of it, and I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. That's a part of that comic book idea that I liked about it, and the fact of a demon unicorn was just awesome. I even looked it up. Since I had the audiobook version, I didn't know how to spell Amducius, so I until Keith spelled it for me yesterday, I had 1,000 different ways in my Google, like Amducius, Caduceus with an M without the C, on and on and on and on. And then when Keith spelled it for me yesterday, I was like, well, no wonder I didn't fucking find it. Jeez. But yeah, no, there's a World of Warcraft character named Amducius, by the way.
All right.
I found that out. But yeah.
And there was a review that went up recently where the person was talking about how Amducius was this being from actual like occult traditions and such, and she was afraid to write his name in the review.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
Wait, that's actually something I probably should have thought to ask you. Why did you choose that one in particular? How did you even come by that one? I remember you said you actually pulled the description from somewhere, but how'd you get there?
I was just, I was looking at, when I started writing the book, I was thinking about what kind of, tradition or mythology I wanted to pull from. And my original thing, I thought, do I want to do something Lovecraftian? But I feel like that's kind of done to death at this point. So I started looking at Goetia, which is, this kind of like ancient Hebrew kind of mysticism around demons and King Solomon and all this. So I just started looking through lists there, and I found Amducius, who was the conductor of hell, and he had all these musical attributes to him. So, really cool. And he was a unicorn, and that like the idea of like a black evil unicorn has always seemed really cool to me. So
yeah, that sounds really cool.
And then I thought it would make some good imagery, and it fit. And then I think I really love the way that Luke Spooner captured Amducius on the cover of the book.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Keith, did you wear that? We wore that shirt for the podcast.
Yeah.
Nice.
I like the cover art a lot. I'm probably going to get myself one of the shirts in a girl size just because.
Speaking of which, while you're on, you might as well. What is the URL so the listeners know where to go to the site where you have some of the shirts and so forth, the merchandise?
So I have it on. That's a very good question with you. I have like a big cartel store that I have some stuff on, and I have a shirt there that I designed. If you'll give me 1 second, I will find it. I should have been more prepared. Product, so curtismlawson.bigcartel.com.
Okay.
Awesome.
I think the narration came out great. I was really happy with it, and I've reached out to a few people who I know who have listened to it, just because I like to get opinions from my readers and listeners moving forward. And everybody I've reached out to is really happy with the narration.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, that's
awesome.
This has been, that was a lot of fun for me to do, actually. And as Marianne joked about it, I was certainly kind of hard on myself for some of the things I was listening to, because there's always a point where I go back to it and go, wait, I could have done this there instead. And
Keith's his own worst critic, where I'm his best. So he did fine. He did great at it, and he doesn't. The fact that you're saying it makes it even better.
That really is what matters when it comes down to it, is what the author thinks, what you think, what your bigger fans think, etc. And I keep trying to remind myself that the goal is just to make sure that the words are understandable for someone listening, and they know who's talking when they're talking, But
yeah, I imagine that must be tough. I tried. I have a short story collection called Black Pantheons, and I tried to start narrating that myself. And I think through the introduction, I was like, I don't have the patience with this.
Sometimes it is maddening.
When he tells me about it, he's like, I read it 3 times usually, to 3 or more times to get the right read on it. And then just having to edit it, an entire book where you're like, here's the first sentence, I've said it 3 times, which one's the best one?
Yep.
And then so on.
Taking the mouth clicks out.
Yeah.
Taking out the gaps.
All that stuff. Just, everyone's like, oh, I want to get into voice acting. I want to do that. And I'm like, do you know how hard it is? Now that I'm married to a voice actor, that's the first thing I tell them. I was like, it is not as easy as you think it might be.
Well,
I always thought that. I remember reading something with, I think, Mila Kunis about Family Guy, and she's like, I go to work in my pajamas. It's like money falls from the sky. I'm like, that sounds awesome. I should do that.
Well, yeah, if once you get to a certain level where you have name recognition, and especially if you've been, if you're a live action actor and they hand you something to do, and you go into a booth and somebody does all the editing for you.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. Especially if you don't have to. Well, I mean, when I started out, I would go to certain conventions, anime and so forth, and hear anime actors talk about what they're doing, and they usually have to match up to animations that's already been done. So they're dubbing from a different language. And they have
doing the different lip flaps.
Yeah, so they have to match the lip flaps. And
that sounds difficult.
Yeah, the other thing, so the sweet stuff is the prelay, apparently, where you just go to a booth, do it, read it out, and they match the animation for you and do all these other things. And yeah.
I assume that's like how Disney does their stuff and all that.
Yeah. You get... It looks so much fun with the cast, just all like smiling and
having so much fun together. Well, is there anything else that you want to bring up with us, or?
So as far as plugging some stuff, I have a new book coming out next month. It's a novella, only about 100 pages. It's called "Those Who Go Forth into the Empty Place of Gods."
Awesome.
Yeah, that's a mouthful because I don't like to sell books. So and I co-wrote this with Doug Rinaldi, who is he's also from around here. He's a New England guy, and he actually stopped writing shortly after we finished this for multiple reasons that I don't really think it's my place to get into.
Okay,
but this is
I will not
Doug's
joke
last
about that.
book, and I'm pretty excited about it. It's up on Amazon for a 99-cent pre-sale for the ebook.
Cool.
And we've got some cool pull quotes from guys like Jeff Strand and Jeffrey Thomas, some pretty impressive authors who've read it and said some nice things about it. So if people want to check that out, that would be cool. And I've also started a Patreon page, patreon.com/Curtis M. Lawson. And I'm doing a exclusive short story there every month, a few pieces of poetry or flash fiction, and some videos and whatever else I can think of that I think people might find interest or value in.
All right.
Awesome. Do you have anything else? Keith, do you have anything else?
Can't think of anything at the moment.
I don't have anything else. We will probably, Keith is going to work really hard on getting this out for Tuesday for us. So, thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for having me on.
This was great.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for this podcast.
Yeah, and I can't wait to hear what the other folks said.
Alrighty. All right, we'll talk to you later.
Quick though, but I think I saw something. Are you doing a Lovecraft episode? If you need anybody for that, that's something I'd definitely be interested in.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do it. We have, I think I have one other person that's interested in it, so that'd be great.
So the guy who wrote the introduction to, or the foreword to Boys Choir, S.T. Joshi, he's actually like the world's like leading expert on H.P. Lovecraft.
That's
and he's like become something of a mentor to me. So yeah, just let me know. I'd love to be part of that.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks a lot, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Who's got the time?